We have finally come to the last Sunday of 2017. I'd call it a good year. I don't know what you call it. I hope your year has been good. And I hope as we roll this last Sunday out here at East Hill, we call it a good year here too. We've had a few be baptized this year. We've had several place membership this year. I'd call it a good year. You can go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 20, and you can just stay there because we will spend the entire night there, just camping out in Matthew chapter 20, looking at one of the parables that Jesus taught. And this particular parable is a very interesting parable because it teaches a very important message. If you start with me in Matthew chapter 20, I want you to read just verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers in his vineyard. There are many parables that we could study. There are many other topics we could spend time with. There are many other places in Scripture we could go and just stay for a little while. But I believe since this is our last Sunday of 2017, it's a good Sunday to study the parable of the vineyard. Because in the midst of this parable, we're going to learn one crucial lesson. Now, there are many lessons to be learned in this parable, and we'll see several. But there's one lesson I want us to focus upon because we are here. Not here upon the earth, because we're here at this place. And this lesson hopefully will encourage us, since it is the last Sunday of this particular year we're in, to understand that we have a chance. We have an opportunity. No matter who it is in this room or in this world, we have an opportunity. Now, I'm not talking about an opportunity to work as we work upon this earth. Most of you come Tuesday morning, it's back to work. I'm not talking about that type of work. I'm not talking about working in a vineyard per se, not a literal vineyard. But I want us to consider what's happening in verse 1 tonight. For the kingdom of heaven is like. I want us to consider heaven tonight. Not in the way we've done in the past of what is heaven going to be like or who is going to be there. Even that question will be answered tonight. I don't want us to consider the way the streets are going to look or how the city is going to be or who's going to be there in specifics of, is God going to be there? Is Jesus Christ going to be there? I don't want to consider tonight the angels who sing his praises. But I want to consider us. And I want us to consider our world. Because I understand, as you are sitting there thinking, most people in this room are Christians. And I'm glad of that fact. Some are not. And I hope tonight you may become a Christian. You know, I've never said that in the start of a sermon. Maybe we should some more. If you're not a Christian, I hope you become one tonight. And I hope when we finish this lesson, we're only going to look at 16 verses. We've already looked at 15 more. That you'll understand you have the time right now. So let's begin by looking into our parable this evening. We're going to look at three things. We're going to look at the summary, and that's going to take up the first few verses as we look at the particular scenes happening at the before and the end of this particular chapter. When you go to the setting of this particular chapter, you have to go back into the previous chapter, and you have to look at what's happening in verse 27, where Peter is asking Jesus a question, and he wants to know in this particular scene, those who have forsaken all and followed Christ, what will they have? Of course, verses 28 through 29 give a depiction, and we see the same scene happening in verse 30 as we're going to see in verse 16 of chapter 20. So all of this comes on that setting. Then we're going to look at the summary. We're going to sum up some of the things that have said and learn some minor lessons and some major themes in this particular parable. And then I want us to do what I call the message. What's the emphasis happening here? How do we relate this to you and me? And that's where I want us to take a specific look at everyone here and everyone outside of these walls. Now understand, I know most people here tonight are Christians, but I want us to get a point. I want us to see something that's happening here that sometimes we forget. Sometimes we're forgetful people, and I think there's something here that we forget. The setting of this, of course, begins in chapter 19 with Peter again. And when you go to that section, you see something that men often ask. Who's the best? Lord, I've given up everything for you. What shall I receive? We would call this a typical question. It's a question people of our day might ask. And matter of fact, someone may ask you, if I become a Christian, what will I get? If you go back to chapter 19 and you look at that again, what shall we have thereof? For what am I going to give up, and what am I going to receive for doing it? And thus he enters into the parable in verse 1 of chapter 20. For the kingdom of heaven is like. He's going to show us something. The faithful who give up all, it's going to be like the kingdom of heaven. And he's going to correlate this to something we understand. The setting comes in the fact that there's a vineyard. And I know we're not people who work in a vineyard. Heard some people tonight talking about how they used to go pick cotton. I've never done that. I know some of you have. There are some people here who may not even know what picking cotton is yet. But we can understand what's happening in this scene. There was a labor force that was needed. There was a wage that was set. And there was a laborer, one who went out and hired people to work in his field, his vineyard. I understand the setting. We understand the setting that's happening in this particular scene. Jesus, in this particular scene, as you look back into chapter 19 and look at verses 27 through 30, Jesus tells Peter and the others who have forsaken all that they will be with him for eternity. That's the scene he's giving in this particular scene. He's showing in the end of verse 29, those who forsake all, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit, notice this, everlasting life. And thus, when you see the scene of verse 30, but many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And thus he enters into the scene in verse 21, for the kingdom of heaven. Remember, these are connected together. And thus he begins his parable. So the setting of this parable, Lord, who's the best? Who's the greatest, and what's he going to get? Because he gave up everything for you, Lord. There's the setting. The setting's real simple. Then we have the summary. Now, this is where we'll spend the majority of our time because I want us to see, and we need to see together what's happening. We see the scenes in verse 1, and I want you to notice midway through verse 1, the householder has gone out, and I want you to see this. He has gone out early. The landowner hires workers, and they agree upon a wage, but I want you to see the scenes, and we're going to see several things along with the PowerPoint as we go through these passages. This laborer, he went out early. Now that signifies something to us. This is one of the many lessons we're going to learn. The Lord has gone out early to take care of mankind. Remember verse 1, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a landowner who went out and hired, and he went out early. The people who are in this room that are Christians, the reason you're a Christian is not just the fact that someone discussed it with you, but it has to do with the fact that in the span of time, God went out early enough for all of mankind to be able to partake of these blessings and to be able to be hired into this vineyard that's being described as this householder would do. So he goes out early in this particular scene. But I want you to see this also in the verse. In the morning to hire laborers in his vineyard, look at verse 2. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. The wage was worth it. The wage that was being paid, which we see on the scene of this in verse 2, a penny a day. Think about eternity for a moment. What does eternity cost? Well, on what we already know, I understand that eternity is at least going to cost me some labor. Eternity is at least going to cost me doing something. It means I'm going to have to go out and work, and it means there's going to be a wage in which has been agreed upon. Now, I want you to see the scenes of this in verse 2. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, who made the agreement there? See, sometimes we read this and we see the scenes that the laborers, they talked him up to the penny. It would have been a fair day's wage during that time. You see, when we read the word penny, it turns our ears off to the parable, doesn't it? Because a penny, well, how much will a penny get you? Well, what you know about a penny is you're going to have to pay tax on it. It's not going to get you very far. But in this day, this was a fair wage. It would have been a worthy wage of a day's work in a vineyard. The life in which we live as children of God, those who want to be Christians, the labor we put in and the reward that will be given, the wage, is going to be fair and worth it. This entire parable really spends time in accounting terms. Ends, the means, what's happening, the work, the hire, the wage. And thus we think of the Christian life. It's worth its time. Now all we know so far is a man who's went out. He owns the vineyard. He's hired some men early in the morning. And it seems as if he's done hiring. Now, if we stopped at verse 2, that's what we would think. He went out early in the morning, he hired his laborers, he went back home. But notice this, verse 3. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. He went out again. There is a picture being painted here of God who continues to go out to seek. You can recall in your minds Luke 19:10, one of my favorite passages, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. The word seek there is not just a word that means he went out once. It's a word that means he is seeking as he is going all the day long. Hear this man who is being likened unto God, the man who is over this householder, or this house, the householder. He goes back out. And he finds more people. And he says, come on, I will pay you what is fair if you work in my vineyard. Look at verse 4. And he said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatso is right I will give you. And they went their way. He found some different people. And notice what he says. He did not say, since it's 3 hours later, it seems, in the text that gives us the idea in the third hour. It seems he went early in the morning, then in the third hour. If it were 3 hours, he did not say, I'm only going to pay you a third of the wage because you are behind everybody else. Just keep that in your mind as you go through. He says, I will pay you, I will give you what is right, verse 4. Now look at verse 5. Again, he went out about the 6th hour, seeming to be some hours later. And the 9th hour, notice this, and did likewise. I'm hoping that we are painting a picture in our minds of this householder who keeps going out to find people to come work in his vineyard, and we get the scene in our minds that this vineyard is large enough for everyone to work. He keeps going out and coming back, going out and coming back, and in every occasion, he tells these people, what is right, I will pay you in the 3rd hour. In the 6th hour, he did likewise. What is right, I will pay you. In the 9th hour, he did the same. He did likewise. What is right, I will pay you. We are painting a picture in our minds of one who continues to go out to bring others into the vineyard and to give them their reward. And we continually are painting a picture in our minds of one who has the ability to pay the price. You see, this householder, he had to have the financial backing, we'll use that term, to be able to pay these people to work in his vineyard. We're painting a just and fair and righteous picture of God. So here we find ourselves in this particular scene in verse 5, but look at verse 6. Not just the first time he went out, not just the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, the 9th hour. He goes out again. At about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle and said unto them, Why stand ye here idle, or all the day idle? Why aren't you doing anything? Why are you standing by doing nothing? I have work for you to do. And he sends them into his vineyard. But I want you to see unto this, in verse 7, what they respond. They say unto him, Because no man has hired us. Now you keep that phrase in your mind when we get to the message of this particular idea. You keep that phrase in your mind. Because no man hath hired us. Keep that in your mind. Because no man hath hired us, he said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. For the 4th time, for the 5th time, he goes out. And he tells these people, what is right, I will pay you. But on this occasion, there is a word that is used that we need to notice. That shall you receive. He knew when it was time for him to pay up, when it was time for them to receive, he could pay them. We're painting a picture of God and this householder as one who has an unlimited supply of wages. That's the best way we can put that. An unlimited amount of work, an unlimited amount of riches or wages. He has everything that the laborers would need. And he sends these people in verse 7 into the vineyard for them to do their work. As you know, in the workday, eventually it comes time, and we love this phrase, to punch the clock. It's time to go home. A day much anticipated to most people that work. Look with me in verse 8. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard, there are others working in the vineyard other than just the householder, but the one who was the Lord of the vineyard said unto the steward, call the laborers and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. There's an order taking place here. Remember, he's trying to answer the question, verse 27. What's our reward, Lord? We've given up so much. The householder sets it in order. Start from those you hired newest and go to those who have been longest in their pay. So we're starting from the ones who have worked less to the ones who have worked the full amount of time that the householder needed. Verse 9 says, and when they came, they that were hired at the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. Replace that in your mind. Replace that in your mind for emphasis to you. They received every man a right payment. We're going to do this as we go through this to get it into our minds, because we may fall into the trap that's coming here, or the scenes that's going to be set here for those in which we're responding, or the one that was asking the question. And give them their hire. So here they received a penny. Verse 10, but when the first came, they supposed. They assumed. They had been considering it during the day. Here's people at the 3rd hour, they've come along. Here's some at the 6th and the 9th, and here's some at the 11th. Look at how much work I have done. Remember the question Peter asked? For those of us that have given up so much so early, Lord, what do we receive? It's the same question. But those that were hired first, they suppose that they should receive more. And they likewise received every man a penny. Read it this way. And they likewise received every one a just reward, or a right reward. Look at verse 11. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, these last have wrought but 1 hour. It seems they've worked for a 12-hour day. They've worked for an hour, and thou hast made them equal to us, which have borne the burden of the heat of the day. We did the hardest work. Don't we deserve more? Look at verse 13. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I do thee no wrong. Did thou not agree with me for a penny? Take that as thine, and go thy way. And I will give unto this last, even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with my own? Is thy eye evil because I am good? And then he says this phrase that was read to us a few moments ago. So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many be called, but few are chosen. The landowner responds to the accusations of those who came about first. Which brings us to the message of what's happening here and brings our minds back to the question that Peter was asking. Who's going to get the best spot? We've given up so much more. Are we getting something more? The same thing with those men who were hired in the first. They're going to get their response. And the response is, everyone who becomes a Christian will receive a reward. And it will be a just and right and perfect reward. Everyone who becomes a child of God will receive a reward. That's something we have to get into our minds. Do you expect a reward for your labors? See, he's not contrasting and saying it's bad to expect eternity. He's not saying it's bad to expect that God is going to give what God has said he would give. But when we start putting each other on pedestals, and when we start tightening up the jacket to show how much we have done, when we start to try to take the priority place, there's a problem in my thinking. Because everyone is going to get a just and right reward. Everyone is offered the same hope. Every person in this room is offered the same hope, a reward that we will receive. And so God is no respecter of persons. God offers what he offers. But let's bring this to a little closer thought or idea. Remember, I ask you to remember a phrase that happened in verse 7. Now contrast this to the idea that most people in this room are Christians tonight. I understand that. I think you understand that. Those that are not Christians, I beg you to listen to this point. Why do people in the world not become Christians? Why do people in the world not become Christians? See, we love to sit back and think of all the reasons. They love the world. They love their religion better than they love God. And we love to come up with all of these ideas. Here in verse 7, there were these people who had been standing around all day and they had no work. And when the householder asked them, "Why have you not come?" this phrase is being said: "Because no man hath hired us." They were waiting for someone to ask. They were waiting for someone to ask. It's not the fact that God is unjust. It's not the fact that his householder was going to give a different reward. It's the fact that no one had asked them. Now let's make the application to those that are not Christians tonight and to those that are in the world. And I want to do it with this question. And it will sum up what we're doing, because everyone has the opportunity to be with Christ. Are we doing what we're supposed to? I'm not asking you, is the world seeking for Christ? I'm not asking those that are here, are you seeking after Christ if you're not a child of God? I'm directly asking those that are Christians that are here tonight, are we following through with what we're supposed to do? Those that were not hired at the 11th hour, they had not come because no one had asked them. Let's apply this to our world. The ladies' class did this recently, and we're going to do it tonight, because it burdens us with the emphasis of the answer to our question. How many of us who are blessed to wear the name Christian, how many of us took the time to ask? To reach out to someone that we know. We all know folks, don't we? I think every person in this room can think of someone right now. Have we done our part? You see, everyone has the opportunity to become a Christian. Everyone has the ability to become a Christian. And it does not matter if someone comes in at the last hour or if someone would come in at the first hour. The principle is being made to the question that Peter asked. What are we going to give? What are we going to receive? We've given up so much so early. And the answer that he received was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're thinking about it wrong, Peter. Because you're going to receive a just reward. What is heaven going to be like? It's going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect. That's the one word we need to hear. Our world is not perfect. But the place that God created for those that are faithful is. Everyone has an opportunity to be with Christ. It just becomes, what are we going to do? For those that are Christians, I encourage us, in 2017, next Sunday, let's make an emphasis. We've been blessed with so much. We've been given so much. Let's not waste it. Let's reach out to those that need reaching, not because we're perfect, not because we're the holy ones on our own accord, but because God's involved. You know why all of those people who worked under the householder could work as they worked? Because the householder was involved. Same is true for us in our lives. Christians, God is involved. Are we? It may be the case that someone here is not a Christian, and I want to ask a direct question. It seems very pointed at this moment to ask, do you want to be a Christian tonight? I do not know what's happened to you in your life. I do not know your life story. I do not know your background, but I do know this. God is still hiring. God is still looking for people to work in His vineyard. Do you want to submit an application? Do you want to work for the Lord? Better yet, let's ask this question. Do you want to receive a just reward? Because that is what God is offering. You can have that tonight by becoming a child of God by the way the Bible depicts, by hearing the Word of God, by believing it, putting your faith in it, repenting of your past sins, confessing the name of Christ, and being immersed. Interestingly enough, I can hear the pump in the baptistry behind me. That means there's water there. Everything is ready. Are you? If you're not a Christian tonight, whoever you may be, consider this fact. God will always be righteous. God will always be righteous. That means you will never be mistreated by God. Maybe the case that you are a child of God in this room tonight, as many of you are, and there may be something wrong in the midst of your life. Maybe it's sin you've been involved in, maybe it's problems you've been having. Whatever it may be, nothing is bigger than the problems that God can fix and the sins in which He can forgive. It only takes a little humility to make it right with the Lord. And we have to remember, too, God is always righteous. If anyone has a need tonight to respond to the Lord's invitation, why don't you do so as together we stand and sing.